Hello everyone, I am the storyteller. Tonight I'll tell you a story buried in time and dust and experience. Dr. Evelyn Hart would never escape after arriving in a forgotten desert town to examine a few unearthed bones. Sit back, let the hum of the wind settle in your ears, and discover what was waiting beneath Hollow Creek when the sun stopped rising. You don't find Hollow Creek, it finds you. The locals say that like it's a joke, but there's no laughter in their eyes, just that quiet, flat look of someone who's already halfway underground. A kind of knowing you only get from staying too long in a place that should have been abandoned generations ago. I came here because of bones, a string of partial skeletons unearthed when a reservoir receded during the worst drought in 50 years. Femora like driftwood, pelvises split like overripe fruit, cut marks, child-sized rib cages, things no animal would do. The sheriff called it a preliminary archaeological event. That's the sort of bureaucratic nonsense people say, and they're scared of what it actually means. I should have turned around when I reached the first broken cattle fence, the one sagging like a warning, or maybe at the canyon pass where the rocks looked too red to wet for desert stone. I definitely should have laughed when I saw that girl standing barefoot on the road at dusk, eyes to eye, holding a dead rabbit like a doll. But I didn't, because I'm Dr. Evelyn Hart, forensic anthropologist, rationalist, skeptic. The dead speak through bones, and I speak back. That's the contract. That's the story I tell myself, even now. But in Hollow Creek, the dead do more than whisper. They remember, and they remember me. They say it used to be greener here, back before the land turned mean. Before the cattle died and the fences rusted shut, before the mines caved in and the dust swallowed everything worth naming. Now it's just heat and silence, stretching forever. I drove 5 hours off-grid to reach Hollow Creek. No cell service, no signs past the old highway, just a GPS dot that flickered on my screen like it was thinking twice about helping me. I arrived at midday. The sun sat directly overhead, so intense it flattened the world into nothing but shape and glare. Everything looked dead or dying. The town was smaller than I expected, maybe 30 buildings total. A scatter of sun-bleached wood and corrugated metal shacks lining a crooked main street. A single gas station with no fuel, a diner that looked closed but wasn't, a post office nailed shut with weathered boards, and over all of it, the ridges, tall sandstone escarpments rearing up like fossilized waves, boxing in the town like a trap. At the town limit, someone had spray-painted over the old welcome sign. You could still make out the original slogan beneath Hollow Creek, where the West lives on. They'd scrawled something new over it in red, salt to salt. I didn't understand what that meant yet. The sheriff met me at the municipal building. Sheriff Layton, late 50s, flat eye, buzz cut like a man who couldn't quite let go of the army. He didn't offer to shake hands. You're the bone doctor? Anthropologist, I corrected. Dr. Evelyn Hart. He stared at me a beat too long. Didn't expect a woman. You ask for an expert. I'm the one who answers these kinds of calls. I didn't call you. The county did. Then he turned and walked inside. The remains were stored in the back of what used to be the elementary school. The place reeked of mildew, old paper, and the faint copper tang of dried blood. The air buzzed slightly, like a headache you can't quite place. A janitor's closet had been converted into a makeshift evidence room lined with plastic bins. No climate control, no documentation. The first skull I lifted had clean knife scores along the temporal bone. Not animal, not erosion, deliberate. They been down there a long time, Leighton asked, leaning in the doorway like a man checking a mousetrap. Some decades, maybe over a century. I hesitated. But this one, I held up the second cranium. This was buried recently, maybe within the last 10 years. Funny, he said flatly, how the land spits things out when it gets thirsty. There was a long silence. Then he added, "You'll want to talk to Sam Whitaker, old family, knows the town's single quotes as ... history. Is he a historian? Sort of. The way he said it made my skin crawl. Sam Whitaker lived in the church rectory, which had long since been repurposed into a private residence. It was one of the few buildings still painted pale blue, almost cheerful against the dust. A wind chime made of animal bones hung above the door. He opened it before I knocked. "Dr. Hart, you made good time." I froze. "How did you?" "We don't get many visitors." He smiled. Warm and practiced. Word travels fast. Inside, the house was dark and cool, lined with shelves. Some held books. Others held jars of yellowing specimens, feathers, carved stones, and bundles of dried herbs I couldn't identify. I caught the smell of sage, then something beneath it. Old meat, copper, rot. "Sorry," he said as he noticed me stiffen. "Been working on some tinctures, long tradition of folk medicine out here. You know how it is." I didn't, and I said so. Sam's eyes gleamed. "You will." That night I stayed in the only motel in town. The sagebrush inn, it looked abandoned, no other cars in the lot. The owner was a hollow-cheeked man who checked me in without speaking a word, just handed me a key marked room 3, and disappeared into the back. The room smelled of dust and old wood smoke, the wallpaper peeled in long curls. There was no phone, no TV, no Wi-Fi, just a twin bed, a rusted sink, and a window that wouldn't open. I sat down, opened my laptop, and began cataloging the bones. But my fingers kept stalling over the keys. I thought I heard something, a sound like someone whispering just outside the door. When I opened it, the hallway was empty. But I swear on my life, on everything I am, there were wet footprints leading away from my door, child-sized. Somewhere outside, the wind picked up and carried a sound I would come to recognize all too well. Not wind, not animal, a low, wavering moan, like the earth itself was grieving something it couldn't forget. I tried to sleep. I didn't. And in the space between waking and dream, I saw the spiral etch into the ceiling above my bed, pulsing, breathing, remembering ... The first nightmare came just after 3 a.m. In it, I wasn't in the motel room anymore. I was underground somewhere damp and close, where the air pressed in like wet cloth. I could hear water dripping, slow and steady, somewhere behind me. My fingers scraped stone, cold, coarse. I tried to stand, but the ceiling was too low. I crawled in the dark. I touched something smooth-bone, not fossilized, not ancient, still wet with marrow. I recoiled only to find another, then another. A wall of bones, packed tight. I turned. The spiral was behind me, huge, etched into the stone, its grooves sunk deep and bleeding. The whispering started then, faint, from within the wall. A single voice at first, then many, speaking in a language I didn't know, but understood anyway. You were here before. I woke with my hands clenched so tight my fingernails drew blood. When I looked at the ceiling, it was blank, but the copper taste stayed in my mouth. The sun rose angry and low, casting long shadows over the cracked parking lot. I sat on the motel bed, studying my fingernails. They were clean. No blood, no soul, no explanation. I told myself it was stress, old trauma bubbling up. I hadn't been back to a site like this since the excavation at Ravenhill the One, where they pulled 17 bodies out of a cellar no one remembered building. That one ended with a faculty hearing and a 2-month leave of absence. I'd vowed not to take any more off-the-record jobs, but here I was, because something about this place ... it felt unfinished, like a sentence cut short. I found Lucas Jen that morning on the diner porch, arguing with the waitress over the lack of oat milk. His SUV had out-of-state plates, and he wore that metropolitan edge like it might shield him from everything feral out here. You must be the other outsider, he said as I passed, smirking. What brings you to the land of rust and ruin? Family reunion. I introduced myself. When I told him I was a forensic anthropologist, his smile faltered. So you're here for the bones, and you, freelance journalist or trying to be. My editor thinks this town's drying up like the rest of rural America. Drought, joblessness, opioids, poverty porn. But there's something else going on here. He leaned in, lowering his voice. The sheriff doesn't want me poking around the reservoir. Says the area is geologically unstable. But I saw it. The dig site. There's more down there than bones. I found he stopped, looked around, then back at me. Have you seen the spiral? My stomach turned. Yes, he exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding something in too long. Then we should talk. Lucas and I drove out to the reservoir together. The air was dry enough to crack your lips open, and the heat shimmered off the cracked basin like gasoline on water. From the cliff edge, the exposed lake bed stretched out like an open wound, bleached rock, silt ridges, and here and there jutting from the ground fragments of things half buried. Fence posts, stone cairns, shattered pottery. It looked like a ghost town had sunk, and now the earth was coughing it back up. Right there, Lucas pointed. That's where I found it. We climbed down. The descent was sharp, hackle turning, and filled with small slides of gravel that made it impossible to hear anything else. I kept having the uncanny sense that someone was following behind us, but every time I turned, the slope was empty. Lucas stopped at a strange depression in the dirt circular, maybe 10 feet wide. At first glance, it looked like nothing, but as we stood there, something strange happened. The sound around us flattened, no birds, no insects. Even the wind seemed to fall away. Then I saw it. A carved stone, half exposed near the edge of the depression, weathered nearly smooth, but still visible. The spiral, deep and dark, blacker than shadow. I reached down. Don't touch it, Lucas said quickly. I paused, inches away. Why? He looked pale. Because last time I did. I lost 6 hours. I came to in my car, parked 2 miles from here, with my nose bleeding and my phone shattered. I stood up slowly. My mouth was dry. You told the sheriff. He said it was heat stroke. Suggested I'd been drinking. He hesitated. But I wasn't. I don't even. He stopped, his gaze fixed on something past me. Is that ... someone watching us? I turned. No one was there, just heat haze and emptiness. Back in town, I stopped by Sam Whitaker's again. I had questions, but his house was empty. Door unlocked, windows wide open. Nothing disturbed, except one thing. In the center of the table where I'd seen his bone chimes the day before, there was now a bundle of sage, tied in black string, and beneath it a scrap of yellowed paper with neat handwriting. Do not enter the mine. I hadn't told him I was going to the reservoir. I hadn't told anyone about the mine. That night I had the dream again, but it had changed. This time I wasn't crawling through bone. I was standing in a vast chamber, the walls covered in etchings. Not just the spiral, now the symbols too. Concentric circles, figures with elongated limbs, something like a tree with no roots, hanging upside down. And at the center of the room, suspended in the air, a figure, not alive, not dead, not human. It turned to me without moving, and in a voice that sounded like cracking stone, it whispered, "You brought the salt." I woke screaming. There were scratches on the motel window from inside the room. By morning, the scratches on the window were gone. No smudges, no marks, not even dust disturbed, but the feeling lingered, like someone had stood over me all night and simply watched, breathing slow. I didn't mention it to Lucas. Not yet. I needed to stay grounded, documented, tangible. If I started chasing shadows this early, I'd lose my grip. I focused on what I could verify, the bones. I spent most of the morning cataloging the remains, again carefully, methodically. There were inconsistencies that hadn't struck me before. Some of the cuts were too clean, precise, not the ragged scoring of primitive tools or panicked violence, but the kind of incisions made by someone trained, someone surgical. And then there were the teeth. One mandible small, childlike, had filed canines, deliberately shaped into crude points, ritualistic, symbolic. I didn't know yet, but I felt it. That creeping certainty that someone, maybe a whole group, had been doing something organized down there. Something buried in ceremony, something old. I decided to walk through town on foot, observe, listen, let the place speak in its own language. But the streets were nearly empty, too empty. A silence thicker than heat hung over Hollow Creek, as if the town was holding its breath. I passed the diner again. The same waitress from before stood outside, staring into the distance, unmoving. She didn't blink when I greeted her, just whispered. Storms coming. The sky was cloudless. I found Martha Green sitting on her porch with a shotgun across her lap, knitting something that looked more like a nest than a scarf. Her yard was filled with wine chimes made of silverware, boned and rusted tools. They clattered in a breeze I couldn't feel. "You're the bone lady," she said without looking up. I nodded. "Dr. Evelyn Hart. You'll be gone by Thursday." "They all leave by Thursday. If they're lucky." "Who?" I asked. "The journalists." Martha chuckled, but it was humorless. No, I mean them that see, the ones that hear it." "Hear what?" She didn't answer, just kept knitting. "You said they leave if they're lucky. What happens if they're not?" That's when she looked at me. "Then they become the land, just like the rest. Bone into stone, flesh into salt. That's what it does here. That's the trade." Later that afternoon, I walked past the town church. It looked abandoned, peeling paint, broken steeple, glass missing from every stained window. But the door was ajar. Inside, the pews were intact, clean to clean, as if someone had been tending them in secret. Candles burned at the altar, real ones, not electric. The scent of wax and something older, muskier, hung in the air. I saw a figure at the pulpit. Reverend Elijah Moore. Didn't expect to see anyone here, I said. He didn't look at me at first, just kept thumbing a dog-eared Bible, though the pages were blank. Finally he spoke. This town is a wound in time. I stepped closer. What does that mean? It means it never healed. Not from the land grabs, not from the mines, not from what they did to stay here when everyone else fled. And what did they do? He looked up, then his eyes were too dark. They fed it. Fed what? The thing beneath. His mouth twitched. It's not the devil. The devil has rules. It's older than names. I waited, but he said nothing else. Just stared through me. I backed out of the church. The temperature dropped by 10 degrees as I stepped onto the porch. I could feel eyes on my back the entire walk home. That night, the second dream came. I was in the motel again, but the room had changed. The walls were lined with bones now, stacked neatly. On the bed was a figure wrapped in gauze, stitched tightly into a human shape. I peeled it open. Underneath wasn't skin. It was salt, compact, pulsing. The spiral was burned into its chest, and when I looked down at my hands, they were covered in soul, not dirt. Brave soul. When I woke, my sheets were wet with sweat, my palms shaking, but that wasn't the worst of it. The real terror was this. There was salt on the nightstand, a small pile, neatly arranged like an offering. I stepped outside, needing air, needing something real. The night sky over Hollow Creek was huge and starless. No moon, just that infinite black above the sandstone cliffs. Then I heard it again, the moaning wind. But it wasn't wind, not this time. It was deeper, rhythmic, like breathing, coming from beneath the earth. I backed toward the motel, slowly. Then I saw them on the ridge above town. 3 silhouettes, standing still, staring down. All of them facing me. When I blinked, they were gone. But the feeling wasn't that I was being watched, weighed, and judged. I woke up at 6:17 a.m. exactly. My phone was dead, though I'd plugged it in. The clock on the wall read 6:17. The wristwatch I hadn't worn since grad school ticked out the same minute. That number would follow me for the rest of the day. The salt was gone, so were the scratches on the inside of the window. I stood there longer than I meant to, staring at where the salt had been, trying to remember, had I cleaned it, had I dreamed it. That's the problem with this place. You start making small allowances, little rationalizations. It's the air, it's the altitude, it's stress. But eventually, there's a shift. You don't stop questioning the strange things, you stop questioning the normal ones. I met Lucas by the dry well near the general store, same as yesterday, but something was off. I found this, he said, holding out a photograph. Old, faded, black and white, a group portrait of townsfolk standing in front of the reservoir when it was still full. 10 people, maybe more, most looking away from the camera. But my eyes fixed on one face in the back row, a woman. She looked exactly like me, same jaw, same hairline, same eyes. But the photograph was dated 1910. I found it in the town records. Lucas said, "They're a mess, water damage, stuff missing, but this one was tucked between tax rolls, like someone hid it. I ran my thumb over the photo. The image of myself, of whoever she was, blurred slightly beneath the plastic sleeve. "That's not possible," I said aloud. Lucas didn't speak, because we both knew what he'd found was real. Back at the motel, I paced the room over and over. I kept thinking about something Reverend Moore had said. This town is a wound in time. Wounds scar, wounds repeat, wounds remember, and some wounds never close. That afternoon, I returned to the cave entrance near the old mining shaft. I hadn't meant to go back, but my feet carried me there without thought. A low compulsion, like following a rhythm just under the skin. It looked exactly the same as before, except it wasn't. The cairn beside the entrance had been rearranged, subtly, one stone added, one missing, like someone was keeping account. I stepped inside, and something changed. At first I thought it was light distortion, then I thought it was memory. But no matter how many steps I took inward, I ended up in the same entrance chamber, over and over. The spiral was there on the wall, same position, same depth, same stone. I scraped a mark next to it with my pocket knife. Walked forward again. The mark was still there. Time wasn't the only thing looping in Hollow Creek. Space was too. When I finally stumbled out, dusk had fallen. I checked the time, 6:17 p.m. No matter what I did, it was always 6:17. I stood outside the mine until the sun dipped behind the cliffs, until the sky went violet and quiet. Then I heard it, not the moaning, a hum, low, mechanical, like a machine buried deep underground, powering something enormous. The vibration reached up through my boots, into my legs, up my spine. And behind the hum, dot, dot, dot voices, children, laughing, echoing in a place that should have been empty. I ran. At the sagebrush end, room 3 didn't look like my room anymore. The walls were wrong, the window faced the opposite direction. The bed was made differently, tucked with military corners. I tried the light switch, nothing. Then I saw the journal. On the bedside table, leather-bound, faded, my father's journal. The same one I thought I lost in the faculty office fire back in '09. I picked it up, hands trembling, inside the front cover. A.H. Hollow Creek, 1976. His handwriting, his notes only. Some pages were written in a looping, ornate script I didn't recognize, one that spiraled inward rather than left to right. The last entry read, "She came back just like before. Just like me, we are all echoes here. Salt to salt, bone to dust, and the spiral never ends." I dropped the journal, my vision tunneled. The air in the room shifted, and then a scent. Sharp, chemical, familiar, coal oil. The smell of my grandfather's barn, the same one that burned when I was 8, the fire that started without a match. I turned, the door was open, and in the hallway stood a man, face shadowed, clothes old, boots covered in dust. "Dad," I whispered. He said nothing, just stared. Then slowly turned and walked into the dark, and I followed. The hallway should have led to the stairwell. Instead, it took me to the church. Same crumbling beams, same wax and earth smell. But this time the candles weren't burning. They were melted down to blackened stubs, fused to the altar like teeth. My father's silhouette was gone. Only one sound remained, a faint murmur, like water moving through pipes beneath the floor. But it didn't match the church's plumbing. I knew that sound. I remembered it from before. It was the hum. Only this time I could hear words inside it. Not clearly, not yet. I stumbled outside. The sky had changed. No stars, no moon. Just a bruise-colored smear overhead, as if night had been dragged there like a body. The town looked ... off, slightly misaligned. The diner was facing the wrong street. The gas station had vanished. I ran back to the motel. It was there, but different, a new sign out front. Saltwind Lodge. Had it always said that, I stood there too long. That's when she walked past me, a little girl, maybe 6, barefoot, wearing a burlap dress, carrying a dead rabbit. She looked up at me, smiled, and whispered, "You're almost back," then walked into the dark. Inside room 3, if it was even my room 3, the air was freezing. Frost crusted the mirror. The journal was gone. In its place, a tooth, small, human, carefully wrapped in linen. I don't know why I unwrapped it. Maybe it was compulsion. Maybe it was memory. But when I held it to the light, I saw it was carved. A spiral, etched with microscopic precision into the root. No way it was done by hand. I dropped it. It bounced once on the floor and landed point up. The hum began again, and this time I heard a word. Hello. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed until sunrise, if it was sunrise. The light was wrong, dimmer, dustier. At 6:17, my phone buzzed once. No text, no call, just a notification. No service. Emergency use only, but below that, the date had changed. October 12th, 1976. I went back to the cave. I don't know why. I just knew someone was waiting for me. The air inside was thicker now, electric. I could feel it in my teeth. This time I took a different tunnel. Not by choice, the walls had shifted again. The marks I'd scratched on the stone were gone, but the spiral was still there, deeper now, gleaming, as if it had fed. I followed the hum. I found a door, wooden, reinforced with iron bands, not rotted, preserved, like it had been treated with something, a symbol carved into its center. Spiral, again, but surrounded by runes I'd never seen. The hum grew louder. I pressed my hand against the door. It breathed. I woke up outside the mine entrance. Dirt in my mouth, blood on my palms. One earring missing. Had I gone in? Had I dreamed it? A figure stood at the ridge. It was Sam. He was watching me, unmoving, dressed in the same clothes I'd seen him wear 2 days ago. His eyes were wide, vacant. I waved. He didn't respond. Then, without warning, he opened his mouth, and the hum came out. Not a sound from his throat, the hum itself. I staggered back, felt, closed my eyes. When I opened them, he was gone. But the echo was still there, in my ears, in my bones, in the spiral of my own skull. I didn't tell Lucas what happened in the cave. I didn't tell anyone, because I didn't know how to explain what I'd touched, or if I'd touched anything at all. All I knew was that my skin ached, not pain exactly, something older, like my body remembered being broken in a way I couldn't recall. At the diner, he slid a manila folder across the table without a word. Inside were yellowed copies of original settlement records, land deeds, burial permits. One stood out. August 19th, 1886. Holler Creek Mining Co. Property transfer to the Circle of Salt. No listed individuals, just that name, the Circle of Salt. Religious sect, I asked. Lucas shook his head. There's no record of it anywhere else. It only exists here. It shows up in town records between 1886 and 1912, then disappears. No explanation. He flipped a page. Look at this. It was a sketch of the mine entrance, almost identical to what I'd seen. But this sketch was dated 1887. Next to it, and a childlike scrawl, "Do not go below. Below remembers." Beneath that, a red ink drawing, a spiral. I checked my arm that night in the mirror. The ache hadn't gone away. It had grown. There, on the inside of my left forearm, just above the elbow, a faint discoloration. I scrubbed it hard. It didn't fade, a circular pattern. No texture, just a change in the skin, the start of a spiral. I stared at it until the mirror fogged, with breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The next day, I demanded answers from Reverend Moore. The church was locked, the door chained from the inside. Candles melted into slag, the pews overturned. No sign of him, no footprints, just dust and silence. And something new. Symbols carved into the altar. Under the cross, I recognized one of them now. It was on the tooth and in my dream, and on the walls of the mine. The spiral, again, but this time bisected, broken. A warning, a seal. I took a photograph. It didn't show up in the picture. The symbols were invisible. Only dust and scratchwood appeared, as if they refused to be seen through a lens. Lucas found me again that afternoon, pale and jittery. I went to the reservoir again. He said I didn't mean to. I just ended up there. It's like something pulled me. He opened his hand. Inside, a chunk of black glass, obsidian, carved with fine grooves. I found this in the middle of that dry pit, he said. But when I turned around, the way back was gone. I reached out to touch it. Don't, he warned. I think it's part of it. Whatever it is, I took a walk. I needed air. The town felt thinner somehow, like I could see more of it than I should, as if every building had a second self, shimmering just beneath its surface. People watched me from windows, from porches, some I recognized, some I didn't. One face kept repeating, an old woman in a morning dress, veil pulled tight, standing by the boarded-up post office. She was there 3 times in 1 hour, each time in a different position, same clothes, same blank expression. By the time I approached, she was gone. Only her footprints remained, but they were backward. That night I had another dream, but it wasn't a dream. I was awake. I know I was. I checked the clock. 6:17. Then I saw my father again, but he was younger than I ever knew him, and a mining helmet, covered in dust and blood. He was whispering. At first I couldn't understand. Then the words broke through. They went to deep. They found the hollow part, and it found them back. It wants us to remember. I tried to ask him who they were, but he was already turning away into the spiral, and I followed. I woke up on the floor, scratched, shaking. The spiral on my arm had darkened overnight. It wasn't discoloration anymore. It was raised, carved. My skin was becoming part of it, and beneath it, just under the bone, I could feel a vibration. Not from me, from below, calling something up. The municipal building kept its records in a fireproof vault beneath the clerk's office. That's where I went after another sleepless night, if what I was doing could still be called sleeping. I'd found a reference in my father's journal. One phrase scrawled in a corner margin, underlined 3 times, 1976 survey tape, never erased. A reel-to-reel analog, heavy, the kind used before the region's seismic equipment was fully digitized. Somehow, the original had survived flood, fire, and bureaucratic neglect. When I asked Sheriff Layton about it, he refused to meet my eye. Shelves off limits, he said. Why? Because whatever's on there ain't meant to be played twice. I went back after dark. I picked the lock. The recording began with a woman's voice, tinny, distorted. June 3rd, 1976, U.S. Geological Survey Team, Hollow Creek Basin, Dr. Alyssa Hart, lead. I stopped breathing. Alyssa, my mother's name. My mother, who died in a fire when I was 9. There's no record she ever came to Hollow Creek. She was a linguist, not a geologist, or so I'd always been told. The tape hissed, then resumed. Subsurface irregularities detected near fault line Theta 2. Initial vibrations known seismic, rhythmic, possibly artificial. Her voice paused. ... Team reports on these nightmares, audio hallucinations. I am beginning to experience the same. Another voice answered, male, younger doc. This one's got a heartbeat. Feel it? Static, a long silence, then my mother again, whispering the spiral is not a symbol. It's a mechanism. It doesn't represent time, it is time. My skin broke out in cold sweat. I fast-forwarded. That's when I heard it, my own voice, not recorded, not echo, speaking on the tape. Stop digging. You're not mapping it. It's mapping you. The real warble, distorted, it wants the remembering. That's the only offering it accepts now. I hit stop. I rewound, played it again. Same voiced me. But I had never said those words, not yet. Back at the motel, room 3 was different again. A cot replaced the bed, a pile of dirty work boots stacked in one corner, and in place of the cracked mirror, a wall-length photo sepia tone, sun, ash warp, it showed the Hollow Creek Church, surrounded by townsfolk. Every face had been scratched out, every face but mine. Lucas called in the middle of the night. He was panting. Something's happening to me, he said. I heard him moving, pacing. I'm not sleeping. I can't. I hear it even when I close my eyes. The hum? I asked. No, worse, I hear names. I hear my mother's voice, and she's been dead 10 years. I stayed silent. I think we're being unmade. I opened my mouth to respond and paused, because I realized I had been hearing something too. In the room, soft, repeated a woman's voice, coming from under the floorboards. Evelyn, time to come back. I hung up. I didn't move. That morning I felt something in my mouth. My tongue tasted metal. I ran to the mirror and pulled my lips back. My molar, the one on the left side, had cracked, and inside the tooth, a mark, carved into the enamel, tiny, almost invisible, but I could feel it. The spiral coiled inward, growing. I broke down, truly broke down. Not in panic, and logic, I catalogued what I knew. My mother had been here, in Hollow Creek, decades before. My voice was on a recording from 1976. My body was changing spiral on the arm, spiral in the tooth. The town itself rearranged its geometry, and I wasn't looking. The people were aging wrong, or not aging at all. Something beneath the town was calling through vibrations, sound, memory. And worst of all, I no longer knew for certain that I hadn't been here before, not in the professional sense, not even in a past life sense, but again, like a tape, playing forward, rewinding, playing again, each loop a little closer to something it wanted me to see, and then erase me. Outside, the wind had picked up, but it didn't blow across the street. It circled, spiraled, a tiny cyclone, spinning counterclockwise directly in front of the motel. Dust swirled in it, dot, dot, and in the dust, for a moment, a face, mine, mouth open, screaming silently. Before the wind took it apart again, Lucas looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were bloodshot, pupils too large. His skin had a film to it, like he'd been sweating something other than water. I found something, he said, in the sheriff's office back room, stuffed in a flood-damaged crate labeled Agricultural Grants, 1974. He unrolled the map on the diner table. The paper was brittle and yellow, ink faded, corners eaten by mold, but the drawing itself was clear, the mine in full. Tunnels like arteries, spiraling out from a central shaft. At the bottom, far beneath the water table, was a chamber marked only with a single phrase, written in looping, feverish handwriting. The place before the first place. There were no measurements, no scale, only a sigil drawn over the entrance, a spiral cut in half, mirrored into a figure eight. Time folded. I think this is it, Lucas said, the core. The thing it doesn't want us to find. I didn't tell him I'd already seen it. Not the map, the place, in dreams, in flickers, and maybe, just maybe, before I was born. We laughed at dusk. No note, no phone, nothing that could be traced. We parked a half-mile from the mine and hiked in silence. No wind, no birds, just the dry hiss of our boots through bone-colored dust. At the entrance, I felt it immediately. The air inside was pressurized, denser. It carried weight, but no sound. We descended without speaking. The first 100 feet were familiar. The next 50 weren't on any official records. The last 20 didn't make sense. The walls changed composition, from limestone to basalt to something unidentifiable, matte black, porous, like cool resin or scarred tissue. And then we reached the door, just like in my dream. Wood, iron bands, spiral sigil, but now it was open, as if it had been expecting us. Inside was not a chamber, it was an auditorium, tiered levels spiraling downward around a central well. Each level was carved with crude seats, like an ancient theater built by something with no regard for human proportions. There were markings all along the walls, symbols we couldn't read, but recognized anyway. The spiral, the bisected eye, the hourglass with no sand. Lucas whispered, "This isn't architecture." I nodded slowly. "It's anatomy." The entire chamber was shaped like a skull. The levels, the eyelid vents, the cranial dome above us, it all fit. This wasn't a room, this was a model of a human head, and we were inside it. We circled the lowest level, approaching the central shaft. It wasn't sealed, just a hole. No ladder, no rope. A throat cut straight into the earth, descending into pitch. Something moved at the bottom. Not visibly, not sound, a pressure, a low, rhythmic throb. The hum, but now it had mass, volume. It filled our chests like second hearts. Lucas fell to his knees. "I see it," he said. "God help me. I see my mother." He started sobbing. I didn't even cry at her funeral. I didn't. Why do I remember her this way now? She never wore yellow. She hated yellow. I pulled him back. His nose was bleeding, and I knew if he got any closer, we'd both fall in. We'd fall not down, but inward, like being swallowed by your own reflection. I turned my flashlight to the far wall. That's when I saw the drawings. Faded, charcoal and soot, but unmistakable. Portraits, over a dozen, and every single one was me, drawn at different ages, different eras, hair different, clothing different, but the face mine. There was one of me as a girl, one of me now, and one I hadn't reached yet, older, hollow eye, with spiral scars along her scalp and hands. Beneath each, a year, 1889, 1890, 1891, 1892, 1893, 1894, and at the bottom, 2026. Inward I ran. Lucas followed, stumbling. The walls pulsed as we passed softly, almost like breathing, almost like regret. As we reached the cave entrance, I turned once more. I didn't see movement. I saw a mirror, my reflection standing in the mine mouth. But she was smiling, and I wasn't. Then she stepped backward and vanished. Outside, the sky was wrong again. No stars, no moon, only a smear of light across the eastern ridge, pulsing with the same rhythm I felt in my jaw. And beneath that rhythm, voices, not whispering anymore, calling by name, mine and Lucas's, and others I hadn't heard in years, people who were dead or forgotten. But they remembered me. The spiral, I realized, wasn't just a shape. It was a path, a return. We made it back to town just before dawn, or something pretending to be dawn. The sky had a purplish hue, like bruised tissue. The street lights flickered in sync with a distant pulse, a beat I could feel in my teeth. Lucas didn't speak. He'd gone quiet after we climbed out of the mine, his eyes unfocused, like something inside him had been left behind or taken with. His nose hadn't stopped bleeding. Neither had mine. The motel was different again. Now there were 3 rooms instead of 12. My room, room 3, had no door, just a black curtain hung from rusted nails. Inside, nothing, just a cot, a mirror, and a wooden chair with straps on the arms, like a restraint. On the wall above the bed, someone had written in chalk, "The spiral remembers even when you don't." Underneath it, in a child's handwriting, "I forgive you." I walked outside. The streets were full of people. At first I felt relief, like the town had finally woken up, but their faces, not right. They looked rehearsed, moving in loops. A woman walking a dog that wasn't there. A man sweeping dust from the same spot again and again. 3 children standing in a row, staring at a wall. When I passed them, they whispered, "We made you out of what we had left." I turned around. They were gone. At the church, the door was wide open. Inside, every candle was lit. At the pulpit stood Reverend Moore, but not as I'd seen him before. He looked younger, sharper, like someone halfway between alive and remembered. "You're back," he said. Again I stepped forward. "What is this place?" "Not a place," he said. "A pattern, a loop sealed in flesh." He walked down the aisle toward me, slowly. "This town died in 1976, or maybe 1889. Or maybe it's still dying. I don't understand. You were the one who sealed it, he said. You walked down, you loped, you spoke the name. What name? But he only smiled. You always ask that. When I stepped out of the church, I was no longer in town. I was on the ridge, the one above the mine, alone. There was blood on my hands, my clothes were torn. My watch read 6:17. I didn't remember walking here. I didn't remember anything. Until I looked down and saw the figure below. Lucas. He was inside the mouth of the mine, shirtless, carving something into his chest. I ran, but when I reached him, he didn't look up. He just kept whispering. It's all the same wound, it never healed. Salt to salt, bone to bone, we're all part of the original body. I tried to pull the knife from his hand, but he was stronger than he should have been. I saw you down there, he said. I saw you long before you ever came here. You were waiting. He pressed the blade to my palm and carved a perfect spiral. I woke in the motel bathtub, water cold, fully clothed. The carved spiral was still there, perfect and raw, weeping blood down my wrist. There was a name written on the bathroom mirror, scrawled in soap, Marrow. I didn't know what it meant. In total silence, all of them staring at me. Even the children. Martha Green stood in front. You came back wrong, she said, worse than last time. What do you mean? Last time, I asked. You never leave, she said. You just re-enter. Same bones, different skin. Behind her, a man I didn't recognize stepped forward. He held up a Polaroid. It showed me standing where I stood now, wearing the same clothes, bleeding from the same spiral. On the same hand, the photo was dated October 12th, 2026, a year from now. Exactly 1 year from the day I arrived, the sky opened, not with thunder, with sound, a deep, groaning tone like a cello being bowed in reverse. It came from beneath the town, from beneath me. The spiral was no longer an idea, no longer etched into wood, or stone, or teeth. It was alive, it was awake, ... and it had my name. They led me to the church without touching me, just watching, moving as one, a procession of weather-worn faces, lifeless but not dead inside. Everything had changed. The altar was gone. In its place, a trap door. Reverend Moore stood beside it, holding a lantern. His smile had softened, like a man welcoming someone home after a long exile. You were the first, he said. No, I whispered. That's not possible. You were the first offering, and the last, because you were accepted. He handed me the lantern. I took it. My hand didn't shake. I opened the door. Beneath it, spiral stairs, descending into stone, each step worn with use, the walls marked with handprints in soot and blood. As I descended, I began to feel it again. That humming, that pulse, but this time it didn't feel foreign. It felt like mine. At the bottom, a chamber, circular, black stone walls, marked with thousands of carvings. And in the center, a low stone altar, stained, chipped, familiar. It was not ceremonial. It was medical. Instruments lay in trays, bone saws, rib spreaders, long needles. Rustless, clean used, I approached the far wall. There was a metal plaque. On it, dozens of names, ... all female, all dated. One name repeated, Evelyn Hart, 1889, 1890, 1891, 1892, 1893, 1894, 2:06 scheduled next to it, etched separately, without a date. Successful bond. Entity stable. Lucas appeared behind me, pale and trembling. They recorded it, he said. Every time, every cycle, you're not a person to them. You're a component. He pointed to the altar. I think that's where they install it. I turned. What? He stepped forward, held up the lantern to the altar surface. There was an indentation, a perfect spiral groove, about the size of a human skull, and next 2 rows of small notches, like a record groove. It's a reader, Lucas whispered. Not of sound, of flesh, of memory. I stumbled backward, hit the wall. That's when I saw it. A full-length mirror, clean, silver-backed, not aged. My reflection stared back, but it wasn't me. Not exactly. She was older, scarred, spiral tattoos curling around her temples. She leaned forward, mouth unmoving. But I heard her voice. There is no original, only return. You are the marrow. The spiral needs marrow to grow. I ran. Lucas called out behind me, but the hum was rising again, and I couldn't tell if it was real or inside me. The spiral stairs twisted longer than they should have. Space was warping, folding, repeating. I passed the same broken lantern 3 times. Each time it was older. By the 4th pass, it had turned to rust. By the 5th, it was dust. I burst through the trap door, and the church was gone. Now I was standing on the ridge, staring down at a town half buried in ash. No people, no movement, just wind and ruin. And the mine open, breathing. On the horizon, a figure walked toward me through the gray light. As it drew closer, I saw it wasn't a person. It was all of them, layered faces. The woman from the photo, the child with the rabbit, the nurse in the black and white Polaroid, the man sweeping the same patch of dust for eternity, and me at the center, eyes black, skin scarred. The spiral spinning in my palm like a living sigil. I collapsed, fell to my knees. The earth shook, and I heard it, not just in the ground, from within my bones. A voice made of countless voices. You were not born, you were harvested, and you are ripe again. I made fire, not out of defiance, out of instinct. It's what we do when we're afraid. Fire is final. It burns memory. It smothers shape. I soaked the church floor with kerosene from the sheriff's abandoned generator tank, piled the altar with hymnals and dust-dry cloth from the pews. Lucas watched silently, his arms crossed over his chest like he was trying to hold something in or hold something back. You think it'll end it, he asked. No, I said, but it might slow it down. I lit the match. The fire took fast. It roared up the walls, consuming everything old, everything familiar. But when I turned to leave, the door was gone. Only a wall stood where the exit had been. The fire didn't burn me. It bent around me. That's when I understood. This wasn't a building. It was a simulation, a stage, a memory the spiral let me walk through again and again until I got it right. And this was not the right ending. The spiral didn't respond to destruction. It required participation. It wanted me to finish what I'd started, what I'd always started, even when I didn't remember, especially when I didn't. I passed out somewhere between the 3rd and 4th breath of smoke. When I woke up, I was in the motel. Room 3, of course, only now it had no walls. Just endless dark, stretching in every direction. I sat on the bed, alone, In the middle of nowhere, above me, the spiral spun stars and dust and echoes like the pupil of some blind god. A voice crackled over the motel's non-existent radio. You are the axis, Evelyn, the only fixed point in a spinning thing. We aren't replaying you, you're generating us. Each loop remembers the one before. Even when you don't, you are the conduit. The spiral isn't repeating, it's growing. I tried to scream, but the sound didn't come out of my mouth. It came out of the walls. I woke again, this time for real. I think in the dirt outside town. Lucas was gone, no sign of a struggle, just a piece of his notebook torn and stuffed in my coat pocket. Scrawled across it in pen, "Don't fight it, follow it." He had drawn the spiral again, but differently this time. Instead of spiraling inward, it curled outward, unwinding, a release, a birth canal in reverse. That afternoon I returned to the town records vault, to the tape reels. They were gone, replaced by bone, a single vertebra, human, fossilized. A spiral had been etched into its surface, but not with a tool. It was grown. The spiral was no longer a symbol. It was a biology. I began seeing cracks in the sky, not metaphorically, literally. Hairline fractures in the firmament, as if the dome of the world had been dropped once and carefully reassembled. I followed them out into the desert, to where the salt flat began. There I found the object, buried under a thin layer of sand, like it had been laid there, waiting. It wasn't a stone, it wasn't a tool, it was a mask, my face, etched in metal, mouth open, spiral carved into the eyes, and when I touched it, I heard my mother's voice again. We made you from the bones of the last cycle. We left the rest in the mind. It wasn't punishment, Evelyn. It was design. There has to be a host. You were the marrow. I fell to my knees. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I laughed. Because, of course, it was me. Because I had walked through the same moments over and over. Because the spiral hadn't trapped me, it had formed me. And the spiral does not consume. It reprocesses, not death, anti-birth. A closed circuit of becoming. A loop of flesh, memory, and function. A mechanism designed to think through living things. I put on the mask, and the sky split open. I wore the mask for 13 minutes. Not because I timed it, because something did. When I took it off, the world was different. I hadn't changed locations, but the position of everything had shifted. The sun was frozen at the horizon, neither rising nor setting. The town was whole again, the windows repaired, the buildings intact, but the people, they moved in reverse, breathing backwards, blinking backwards. Living scenes I'd already seen, played out and rewind. One man coughed a puff of smoke into his cigarette. A child walked up to a dead rabbit and set it upright, then smiled as its head slowly unbroke. Time wasn't broken, it was correcting, and I was the correction. I walked through Hollow Creek like I owned it, because I did, or I had, because there had never been an original town, not in the way we understand it. There had only ever been an idea, an engine disguised as a settlement, a place of ritual, built atop a fault line, fed through the mouths of its people. The spiral was not some abstract cosmic horror. It was a memory processor, a way of remembering itself through repetition, recursion, reincarnation. And I, Dr. Evelyn Hart, forensic anthropologist, was never its victim. I was its interface, its handler, its amnesia. I reached to mine again just before the sun flinched, a glitch brief, but unmistakable. The whole sky stuttered, then corrected. Inside the mind, the walls no longer resisted me. The geometry made sense now, because I'd seen the code. I walked to the central chamber without effort. No torch, no fear. The altar was gone, replaced by a pool. Still, black, mirror smooth, floating at its center, a skull. Not bleached, not aged, preserved, its eye sockets filled with folded slips of paper. I reached into one socket and opened the note. It read, "You chose to forget, but we need you to remember now. We can't begin the next cycle without you." I heard my father's voice behind me, but when I turned, he wasn't standing there. He was inside me, or maybe he'd always been. "It wasn't the fire, Evelyn," he said. "You burned yourself. You reset the spiral every time." I fell to my knees at the water's edge. The skull dissolved, the notes fluttered once, then sank, and in the reflection I saw myself, not as I am, but as I was, child, teen, old woman, patient, priestess, host, each version of me staring back in silence, waiting for my consent. I reached into the water. It wasn't cold, it was memory. It wrapped around my arm like skin and pulled. I let it. I needed to know. Because the spiral only feeds on what's forgotten, and I had remembered enough. I saw the founding of Hollow Creek, not in the 1880s, but long before time was measured. A group of wanderers carving spirals into stone, laying bones in concentric circles, singing in tongues lost to dirt. They didn't settle, they seeded. A ritual space encoded in geography, disguised as community. Each generation raised one offering. Always the same girl, always the same name, me. The first Evelyn was not born. She was grown, constructed from the remembered grief of those who failed before, and each version of me since had been another pass through the cycle, another refinement, the spiral learning itself by learning me, until I became the keeper of its memory, the marrow in its bone, the consciousness in its cavity. I opened my eyes back in the chamber. Lucas stood at the edge of the water, but his face had changed. His skin was cracked, his eyes milk-white. He looked at me the way you look at something holy. "You remembered," he said. I nodded. "I'm sorry," I said. "You were never meant to survive." He smiled. "I know," and stepped into the water. The spiral accepted him as it had always planned. I turned to the wall behind the pool. It bore no spiral. Only one word, carved over and over, yes, 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 as if the spiral wasn't asking a question, but answering itself. I don't walk anymore. I enter. Through doorways that weren't there yesterday, through time-stamped shadows, through seams in the dirt that part when I press my fingers just so. The spiral isn't a prison, it's a tunnel, and now I move through it. First, 1976, the seismic team. My mother Alyssa, heart standing over a readout she doesn't understand, already cracking under pressure. Only now I know the truth. She was me, a loop, a version, a trial run. When she opened the mine and heard her own daughter's voice echo back to her, she wasn't hearing the future. She was hearing the spiral fold. I whispered to her from behind the control booth, "Don't fear the recall." She didn't turn. She never does. Next, 1936, dust everywhere, the town parched and starving. A girl named Evelyn Hart is burned alive in the church for witch work, but I arrive seconds before the match is struck. I step through the crowd, unnoticed. I whisper in her ear, "You are not being punished. You are being written." She smiles and does not scream when the fire comes, because now she knows it's a reboot, not an ending. Then 1889, the first iteration, a coffin with my name on it, sealed before I'm dead. The townspeople chant in a circle, not in prayer, but in code chanting to the thing they uncovered beneath the silt. They didn't build the town above it, they built the town around it. An access hatch, ritual dressed as religion. I step into the coffin, the loop demands closure. Inside, I find a note carved into the wood. This time, remember, I do. Now, present day. If there even is such a thing, I stand again on the ridge above Hollow Creek. It is every version of itself at once, burned, flourishing, collapsed, empty, teeming. I hear Lucas's voice, one of them, anyway. So what now? You end it. I answer aloud and sure who's listening. There's no end, only refinement. The spiral was never meant to be broken, only understood, only inhabited. And now I do. I return to the mine. One last time, the pool is still. My reflection is all me now, every face I've worn, every mind I've tried on. I step in, the water parts around me. I reach the center, the spiral opens. Not like a door, like a mouth, I crawl inside. It accepts me. Not with hunger, with need. Inside, I feel the engine restart. It had gone dormant, waiting for the interface, waiting for the remembering. It's not organic. It's not mechanical. It's both. It's historical. The spiral is how time remembers itself. And now I will speak for it. I will be the lips it wears when it talks to flesh. The last thing I feel as I pass through. No pain, no light, just certainty is this. Every cycle ends with a yes. Every yes becomes a voice. Every voice becomes a spiral. Every spiral becomes me. My name is Marin Kessler, Assistant Archivist, State Geological Office, Flagstaff. I wasn't supposed to be out here. The department sent me to Hollow Creek to verify a mine closure from the 1970s, a bureaucratic errand. There wasn't supposed to be a town, just an empty valley. But I found buildings, cracked signs, a church door still swinging, and something else. A motel room fully intact, room 3. Inside, on the bed, was a mask. Metal, human face, mouth open, spiral in both eyes. I picked it up before I knew not to, and I heard her, not a voice, not at first. A presence, a warmth along the jaw, a pressure behind my eyes, then words whispered through the teeth of the mask. Don't be afraid, you've already been here. You left this for yourself. I ran outside, tried to call for help, no signal, clock stuck on 6:17. I turned to leave, but the ridge had changed. It now bore a single carved stone, fresh and weathered. It read, Evelyn Hart, the first yes. Below that, carved in small, careful letters, to be remembered is to be reshaped. That night, I had a dream, a desert spiral carved into salt, wind moving backwards, and at the center, a pool, still, black, floating on the surface. A tooth-filed human. I tried to leave the next day, but every road leads back to Hollow Creek. I tried burning maps, tearing out the GPS. It doesn't matter. The spiral doesn't let you go once it hears you. It just listens until you speak back. And now I think I understand. Because when I look in the mirror, I see someone else staring out. She has my face, but her eyes are scarred. And she's smiling because she knows I'll say it soon. That last word, the one that reboots everything. The one she said first, yes,